We can't have a whole podcast of this. We cannot do it. Well, we could, but let's not.
We should not do it. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Flux.
I'm Ben McKenzie.
Welcome to Pratchett, the monthly Terry Pratchett Book Club podcast.
Each month, we discuss one of Terry Pratchett's books or short stories with a special guest.
This month, we're reading A Collegiate Casting Out of Devilish Devices, a story that we're going to be giving urgent consideration and have formed a committee to do.
Plus, we'll be returning to Thud to get through some more of your great questions, and we're doing both of those with our returning guest, designer and educator, Matt Roden. Welcome back, Matt.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi.
Hello.
It feels like just the other day you were here.
It was like just the other day, wasn't it? Just the other week, the other month? What is time?
Yeah, I mean, like a monthly podcast gives you a good sense of how long things happen between. So yeah, yeah.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
It's really nice to be back.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us in this part 4 of our trilogy in 4 parts covering all things Thud. Who knew there were so many things to cover for this book, but there are. And we got
80% through our quintology.
Yeah. I don't think I asked this last time, but have either of you, for starters, I know that Liz, you've read Where's My Cow? And Matt, we've done a whole episode since we last saw you about the book Where's My Cow. Have you read the children's book?
I haven't, and I guess I just assumed that it was basically what the excerpts in the book gave, but I don't know what other depths there are to it. So it's one for me to dip into, especially now that I feel like I'm some sort of Thud completist, or I'm getting towards.
That's fair.
No, you definitely should check it out. There's some interesting stuff happening with the illustrations and multiple levels of breaking walls, so it's worth having a look.
Yeah.
Does it reach the heights of there's a monster at the end of my book? That was kind of the first break the fourth wall experience I had as a child.
I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Ben, I'm getting huge recognition from you.
Yes.
We do not know this book.
We got asked, what other books do you think you should definitely read that are for kids? And that was one of mine because it's so good.
What's the spoiler at the end? Is there a mirror?
No, I'm not spoiling it on this podcast.
Okay, fine.
I'm not going to do it. I'll tell you privately, but I'm not spoiling it.
I'll get the book.
You get the book. Yeah, you should read the book. Find a copy. Read the book. But also, I was just wondering, I don't know that I asked either of you if you'd ever played the game Thud.
I have not. I'm strangely patchy in board games. Like, I get really into some, but then there's huge chasms of like things that you'd think I'd have played, but I haven't.
I have not, and I am entirely chasmatic when it comes to board games. There's no patchiness for me. An entire Coombs Valley's worth of non-board game experience. I love the idea of them, and I have people in my life who are very obsessive over them. But I'm not particularly competitive when it comes to like games and sports and things like that. I did purchase that board game Wingspan with the intent of immersing myself in what it is to help birds with their life. I was like, yes, this is peaceful. This is non-competitive. The winners are birds. And I found out how far board games have progressed in their world building, how you use all the pieces, and like the functionality of a board game has gone beyond. I felt like someone who'd driven a Model T Ford and then like hopped in a Tesla the next day and yeah, just
yeah.
Have you seen that Auntie Donna clip about board games? I know Ben's been sent it about 15,000 times by most people in his life, but I think about it every time I try and play a new board game because you have to spend, it feels like 5 hours learning how to play and pulling all the pieces out and doing a test round, and then you get to actually play and then it's time to leave.
Yep. I'm going to jump off and watch it, and then I will just forward it to Ben to
turn
that off.
If you don't send it to me, I will take that as another kind of message. I don't know what. It's interesting. I like your analogy of the Model T Ford there, because if that is anything, the board game, it's like a modern recreation of a Flintstones car. Like, it is based on ancient Viking board games. or at least inspired by them. It's not really based on them. The rules are pretty simple, but the strategy is quite deep. So it's a bit like chess, but much simpler than chess. But I would encourage you to play it. It is fun. And if you visit Melbourne, I'll play it with you.
All right. Invitation taken up in the future.
All right. Great. So
Please note that I live in Melbourne and I have not received this invitation.
Well, you have a standing invitation, Lisa. You are unavailable.
So I don't even get to sit down. Yeah, that's true. It is actually my fault.
No, it's fine. We will do it, though. We will do it. And we'll play all the other Discworld board games. We have plans to do that. It'll happen.
It'll be fun.
It'll happen.
And then I'll send you the Auntie Donna clip.
I do always think of long-running podcast co-hosts as essentially living in like bunk beds together. But it's even worse that you haven't like played this game, being that I think of you as bunkies.
I think we have listeners who have thought this. Listener, just in case you don't know this, Liz and I do not live together. We're also not a couple, which a couple of people seem to think that we are. Which is, I mean, I like Liz, but just, that's not how our lives are. We have other partners.
Just clearing up the questions.
We have different cats. It's all, Shall we, now that we've covered the other parts of the trilogy in 4 parts, shall we talk about a collegiate casting out of Devilish devices?
I honestly think that perhaps we should put this out to a subcommittee to decide whether or not we should discuss this one right now, and perhaps put it on the agenda to see if it's more suitable for next year or the year after.
Okay.
I would probably create like a working doc and have that available for people to add notes into. And once those notes have accrued and kind of there's maybe a feeling that everyone has had their say, then it's worth revisiting in a meeting format where we can each voice the notes that we've added to the document.
Well, I could start a doodle poll to see what deadline we should complete the reading of the document by, if everyone is comfortable. But I just think that we should have a Teams meeting beforehand to see if we're all happy using doodle poll or if anyone has any objections to that.
The best way I've found to find that out, Liz, whether we should start a doodle poll before the Teams meeting, is to just set up a Monday board. Okay.
All right. Well, I will ask my assistant, who I haven't yet to hire, and we'll put that together.
Okay. I'll see them on Slack.
I think before we can do any of that, we need to have a preliminary study as to whether any of this is even feasible, and we're going to have to put that out to tender to find someone who can do that for us. So,
first of all, though, does everyone have their working with children check?
Yes. Oh God, we can't have a whole podcast of this. We cannot do it. Well, we could, but let's not.
We should not do it.
Let's not do that. Oh no.
Let's get into it. Let's get into the short story that's only like 7 pages long.
We should. It is very short,
but way too familiar.
Before we talk about the story itself, rather than reading the blurb, which of course doesn't really exist for a short story, we instead read Pratchett's notes from his collection of his short stories. And here they are for a collegiate casting out of Devilish devices. Well, they asked for it and they got it, because at that time there was some debate around issues to do with government money being given to universities, and universities not being particularly happy about being told what to do by governments. Fortunately for Unseen University, they don't have to ask anybody for anything. And only now can I reveal that this short passage owes a little something to the Thursday afternoon meetings I used to have when I was chairman of the Society of Authors, where I learned the importance of listening for the tea trolley and the etiquette of the chocolate biscuits, surely an essential component of real committee work. I don't know about you. I had no doubt when reading this that it was clearly based on real life experience. I mean, taken to extremes, but yes.
Is it taken to extremes?
Oh, a little bit. No.
I don't think there's
you're
any
shaking your head.
I think he's just subbed in some wizard names and there you go.
I was going to say the exact same thing. He's done a great find and replace so that there's like a joke about a crystal ball. But other than that, I was literally reading the notes from my last meeting.
Oh, no. Oh, no. This is, yeah. Well, I mean, look, all of us have worked at various kinds of cultural institution, right? I feel like we've all been there. And I used to work, in fact, full disclosure, I currently am about to work again for a university.
Of wizards?
Sadly not.
No.
But I always used to joke that, if you think government bureaucracy is Byzantine, you should come and work at a university that's existed for more than 10 years. Like it's full on.
I can't even imagine, because I once did a panel at a uni when I was VoiceWorks editor, and to invoice for it for like some small amount of money. They made me sign on as a casual contractor and put in all of these forms, including superannuation. I'm like, please just let me invoice. I don't work here. But it was just this arduous process that took so long. And I was like, nowhere else. So I can't imagine what it's like actually spending a bit longer there. I can't imagine what it's like, but I don't want to.
Well, I mean, look, some things get easier and some things get more difficult. Yes. So I think we all feel like we've had some sort of experience, and I will apologize for anyone for whom this brings up difficult memories if you have worked at a university yourself, because, yeah, look, it is... I mean, we joke. It's not that bad, but it is... we should describe what it is, because there will be some people listening who maybe haven't read this. This is a Thursday afternoon meeting, as were the meetings that Pratchett had at the Society of Authors. And I looked this up because I didn't know what the Society of Authors was, but it's basically the trade union for writers in the UK. Writers, illustrators, and literary translators, but all kinds of writers, even though it's called the Society of Authors. And it's been around for like 200 years, 150 years, something like that now. And he was the chair of their management committee for a year in, I think, 1994 to 1995. So this is an insight into the running of that organization as well. But anyway, this is a Thursday afternoon meeting of the College Council at Unseen University. They're just waiting for the tea to arrive while they...
And the chocolate biscuits.
Yeah, well, yes, they are very important. While they wait for this. And it was published before Thud, but not very much before, only about 4 or 5 months before. So I think it's probably written around the same time as Thud was being written. So it's anyone's guess whether he invented A.E. Pessimal for this or for Thud and then sort of went, but I could put him in this story about the Unseen University for the Times Higher Education supplement who've asked me to write a thing. I don't know. Do you have an opinion about that? Where do you think he came from? From this or from Thud?
I think he probably popped up here first. This is such a complete, great idea, which is just, what if the Unseen University was put under the same kind of, I don't know, strictures as other academic institutions are in the round world? And then you come up with a name like A.E. Pessimal and you want to bring that person to life because, their voice in a document that's read out loud by somebody else is so clear and so perfect that, yeah.
Yeah, because he does not appear. When I first read this, I was expecting him to be in it, and then he's not in it. He's sent this list of questions that the wizards are reading out. But you're right, he does come through loud and clear.
It's funny because I was going to say the other way around. I thought that he'd invented him for Thud, and he was just in his head. And he's like, where else would he be? Like, what kind of, before he becomes this other thing that he evolves into, where else would he have popped up? Like, how would have he been used by the patrician? This kind of thing. But I don't know. You've swayed me the other way. I reckon it could be either one now.
I was thinking Thud first, but I think because he also does, from memory, I think he does insert a reference in Thud, a very vague reference to him having had something to do with the university or having done something for the patrician before. So it could have gone either way. And I don't think it matters too much for this discussion, but it's fun.
Such a peevish name, though. I'm sorry to any A.E. Pessimals who are listening, but it's just such a peevish name.
It's perfect. It's Dickens level of just like the name tells you everything about the character before you've even...
Uriah Heep.
In this, they don't open their mouth or arrive in the way. They just are fully rounded out as a signature on a memo. Yep.
Pratchett is so good at names, though. Like, there's very few of his characters where the name doesn't really fit. A few of them are maybe a little bit over the top in terms of telling you who the character is, but that serves the comedy, and often it's for characters that don't spend much time in the book. But there's no characters where you read the name and you go, that name doesn't suit that person. Like, he really just nails it every time, I feel.
So in the story, A.E. Pessimal has provided a list of suggestions at Veterinary's direction that the university might consider taking up to improve things around there. And so the story is taken up by them going through this list of suggestions and everyone just sort of getting very offended, worried, and
outraged.
Concerned about how things might go.
Defensive, standoffish.
Defensive, that's the word.
These are all words that will appear in none of the documentation of this meeting, but they should.
And it just prompts some great lines and people trying to define what their job is, or not quite, or being forced to say what it is they do, which I really enjoyed, and also being compared to another institution, which they hated. And it was just so good because there was this one where this other university actively trying to get students on board, and they offered them, was it a frog or a frog-like creature?
Oh, yeah, at Brazeneck College. We haven't encountered Brazeneck College yet because we haven't got up to Unseen Academicals where we will properly meet them. They are sort of the yardstick against which the university is being measured. And I think that just makes everything worse for the Wizards. They're like, we don't want to be compared to those idiots.
Well, there's this great page in there. Like, that's my favorite page out of this very short story, which is just stuff full of lines that take aim at all these things about academia, which, again, I'm not heavily involved in, but the thing about Brazeneck publishing papers, and they're like, what sort of papers are there? And they're like, they've got titles like Diathymic Aspect of Cheese in Mice, or possibly it was Mice and Cheese, or maybe Chess. And what was it about, said the dean? Oh, I don't think it was for reading. It was for having written, which is, yeah. If you've ever had to wade through some papers, it's,
yeah.
I'm worried about offending everyone through my history by going too hard on this.
Do you both feel this is one where... Okay, so I think within this short story, Terry Pratchett is absolutely taking a good, sharp aim at the ridiculousness of committee meetings and also, you know, what it is like when institutions receive like some feedback, or the government is like, well, we gave you some money. Could you tell us what you did with that money, and how affronted some people can be in that. But, I mean, I don't think Pratchett thinks that all of academia is ridiculous. Is this just kind of his scattershot, everything is worthy of satire because everything can be satirized?
I think there's a bit of that. I mean, he famously loved academia. Like, towards the end of his life, he dreamed of, in his retirement, just becoming like, you know, an adjunct professor of some university somewhere, so he could just spend all his time in the library and getting big dinners like the Wizards in Unseen University. And I think it started off as a parody of this thing that he'd never encountered directly because he never studied at a university. And I think he does have, or did have, a great deal of disdain for the sort of, you know, big institutions like, you know, Oxbridge. But I think he still also thought, no, but there's a point to it. And there's a great bit in the biography, which I won't spoil too much. We've told a few stories from it since we've read it. But there's a great bit in the biography where he talks about the first time he was invited to Trinity College, which was one of the first universities to give him an honorary degree. And they asked him to teach a class of students. And he was like, what am I going to do? And then, like, by the end of it, he was having a great time and he loved it. And I think, you know, when he got to experience what it's actually like, at least the teaching part, he thought, this is great. But then, you know, the Wizards are, as this story goes to great pains to point out, they really do not like students. They don't want to be about that.
Do you feel any of the Wizards in this, and I loved it as just a snapshot of like this ridiculous group, do you feel any of the Wizards ever wanted to become academics? Or do you think they wanted to become wizards? Or do you think they just ended up in this space which allowed them to have like lunches and sit around and kind of, you know, waffle onto each other?
Oh, it's difficult.
I like that they do rise to the responsibility of being a wizard sometimes. And they're very like, I care a lot about what it is to be a wizard. But the idea that like they will hate teaching and yet they are at a university. And for sometimes it seems like the best appeal of being a wizard is that you, as Ridcully says, dynamically don't do something.
Yeah, which is very much a recurring joke throughout all the books, you know, that's what wizards do best, you know, is to make sure they're not misusing magic, basically. And the idea of the university is to get all the people with magical powers and stick them in a place where we teach them that it's a very bad idea to use those powers and you should just sit around and have big dinners instead. I think it's an interesting question because Unseen University has been like at least 3 or 4 different things in terms of what it's parodying and the kind of story aspect that it, not story aspect, and the kind of thing that it represents in the stories. Like in the early ones, you know, we have this very kind of cutthroat, dead man's pointy boots kind of deal where the wizards have to murder each other to rise up the ranks of the 8 different schools of magic. It's very Dungeons and Dragons / you know, Assassin's School, really, like is what it feels like, an idea that he comes back to with an actual Assassin's School later. But then it kind of evolves from that into this parody of very old institutions where the people who run them are rusted on and out of touch and don't really care about what's going on. And then at the same time, you've also got, in moving pictures, actual students doing actual exams and seemingly going to actual classes. And in Equal Rights, you've got like Simon and Esk who end up, they're doing interesting, weird stuff. They seem to be at the forefront of magic, and then they just vanish and you don't hear from them until ages, for years. So I think it's kind of evolved. I don't know. I get the feeling he's just had several different ideas about what would be fun. And it's when Rid Cully turns up that he's like, okay, well, let's turn it into an actual university. We've had a few jokes about that, but let's make it an actual university.
I mean, there's still classes in this one, as strongly implied by the fact that there's like that guy who sets up tripwires and stuff to prevent the wrong kind of students from getting into his classes. So I feel like that aspect still runs through. I agree that it's changed across its time, but it's hard to know because I feel like everyone here never considered being anything other than a wizard. So it's not so much they sort of went, oh, well, I just want to, I have to learn magic, but I'd rather do this. It's perhaps this is what being a wizard means. It means that you have all the knowledge. You can jump into action if you need to, but you generally don't. It's kind of, again, like Granny Weatherwax's whole thing of not using the magic, but controlling everything. They all love being wizards, in my opinion, but also never considered another path. So it's a bit tricky. So when you ask them to define what it is they do, it's kind of like asking to define themselves as people because it's all intermeshed into one thing. So,
yeah, I like your idea that they were just kind of like born like this. Liz, are wizards like the Discworld's like nepo babies, just to use a term which is in the Discworld, where if you're born as the eighth son of an eighth son, this is just the life you're in. And just like those young people who describe themselves as influencers / actors / DJs / photographers, these people are like, I am wizard. Full stop.
Mm. It does seem to be a thing that you are rather than a thing that you do. Rincewind is actually the poster child for that because he never does any magic unless there's some weird influence on him that makes it possible. But he is adamantly a wizard. And when everybody's going crazy, when the sorcerer turns up, there's that scene where he's on the beach and he's trying to build his own little wizard tower in his sleep out of sand. And and when he loses his hat, he feels like he doesn't really exist. And like, it's integral to his identity in a way that I think it is, even though it's never said as clearly or as directly to all the other wizards as well. So this idea that they have to get on with the business of doing things as a wizard is kind of just like, no.
Yeah, isn't it enough just to be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they can't not anyway, so like...
Yeah. Do we ask the ocean what it does all day?
Yeah.
Do we ask the moon what it's up to? No.
No.
And it's offensive to do so.
Yeah.
I do not know how I feel about bringing Nepo Baby discourse into Discworld, but if we're going to, I feel like we need to talk about Susan.
Oh, no. No, she earns it. She tries to reject all of that.
Yeah, but you can earn it and be a Nepo Baby.
Yeah. Didn't you read the article, Ben? Come on.
No. No. Now I have to put it in our episode notes, and I blame you for that.
Kay Hudson, she's a Nepo Baby, but she absolutely earns it.
Okay. No, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, the other question this raised for me was how much hold the patrician really has over the university. Because the main thing that he's got over them is that I could ask you to pay taxes. There's a great bit in one of the early books where they basically have a standoff. It's him and Rid Cully. We won't pay taxes, but, we agree that we would if you ever asked us to, on the understanding that you will never ask us to, I think is basically where it comes from. And this story is leveraging that position too, because they have all these dinners. They've got this massive real estate in Unseen University. How they make money is not entirely clear. I think probably there's some talk at some point, I think, of rentals or old wizards who have got lots of money bequeathing it to the university. There's a couple of like little references here and there, but it seems clear that they're not actually funded by the city itself. So instead, to go along with this narrative of I'm writing this because there's a current discourse about universities and their funding. Instead, it has to be about, well, we're going to make you pay taxes, which is kind of like taking away your funding because you can't spend it on your crazy high energy magic experiments, which might blow up the whole city. I mean, every now and then.
Disappear straight.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And they make a whole street disappear in time, apparently, which is what's pissed off the patrician and made him do this.
That brings a new meaning to hex debt there, Ben.
That's one for Australian listeners of a certain age, because it's not even called that anymore.
Yeah, now it's called help, which is like really distressing to see on your like tax each year.
Yeah, because it's in capital letters because it's an acronym as well. It's just like help.
Yeah. Help.
Debt. Yeah. Let me explain. University was free in Australia for about 15 years from 1974, but in 1989 this was changed so that students paid a fee towards the costs of their study. This student loan program was called HECS, an acronym for Higher Education Contribution Scheme. You could pay it voluntarily or defer it to be paid as part of your taxes once you earn above a certain threshold of income, in which case it's called a HECS debt. This system was heavily revised and made much more expensive in 1996 and then replaced in 2005 by HELP, the Higher Education Loan Program, though for undergraduate students it's actually called HECS Help, which sounds like a phone counselling service for people who've been cursed. And to be fair, now that discounts for paying the HECS debt up front have been abolished and the threshold lowered for paying it with your tax, it certainly can feel like a curse.
I feel like this is kind of just veterinary. Like, he's not expecting anything to come of it. He doesn't expect them to follow these things. It's his way of being like, hello, I'm here and I could fuck shit up for you if I really wanted to. Just a reminder that I'm around is my take on why he's doing this. Because he also loves a little committee and he knows what is happening when, like, if they come back with they're going to do the urgent consideration, he's like, yep, okay, but as long as you've gotten my message.
Veterinary is always of the school where it's enough to show a person the hoop. They don't need to actually jump through it. I feel like this is part of that.
That was a good way to put it. Yes, I agree. What about the things that are in this note from Pessimal, though? Like the actual questions. There's what do you do? I think we've covered that. But I do like when Ridcully's kind of going, actually, maybe, Dean, we should ask this. Like, what do you actually do? And are you doing more of it in the last 6 months than you did in the 6 months before that? Which is an interesting question about how the wizards spend their time when they're not having crazy adventures. Because the closest, apart from this story, that we ever really see of that is probably the first Science of Discworld book. Because the other ones, there's like some crisis happening that they have to address. Whereas in the first one, it's just a magical experiment that they're messing around with. It feels a bit like, oh, this is what they spend their time doing. Doing stupid experiments with magic.
I reckon they're all very busy, not doing much at all, but feeling very stressed and put upon all the same. Like, there's probably just a lot of admin to keep up the nothing.
Yeah. Is it Lords and Ladies where, like, we see Ridcully's snooker table, which is covered in drifts of paperwork, and he's, like, working out the best, he's taking these magical pot shots around it. And that's the feeling that I get where, like, not to bring up Trump, but I think, like, Ridcully's executive time is pretty extended where it's, he picks up the first piece of paper, yells at somebody to do something about it, probably the bursar, and then, that's enough of that business, and it's probably time for second morning teas around then.
McDonald's for all.
Is that now? See, I kind of agree with you, but also reading this story, it occurred to me that I find this difficult because I really like the wizards, but I don't like that attitude that we just don't have to do anything. We just eat lots of dinners and screw all the students. We don't have to teach them. We don't even need them. But where are more wizards coming from if there are no students?
It was the School of Hard Knocks thing, kind of like, because they all went through it, and so the students will go through the same, and the ones that deserve to stay are the ones who will make it. So, like, the ones who survive the traps, the ones who understand the politics, the ones who have the correct lunch dates, all of that. Like, because the ones who are supposed to be wizards will stay wizards. You don't have to learn stuff to do it. You pick it up along the way, not through the formal studying.
But you kind of do, though. I mean, because there's times in the books where it's kind of talked about that if you are a wizard and you don't get taught how to do it properly, you're probably going to blow yourself up or turn someone into a newt who doesn't need to be turned into a newt, or something. So, yeah, I don't know about that.
I mean, like, not being formally taught in a class or whatever. Like, they probably all have their, like, unofficial proteges or whatever, the ones that they throw a few notes to, or they learn from each other, or they go to the library. They learn, but not through, like, going to class in classic university ways. It's like, again, you find your way through. It's just they're not going to hold you by the hand. And there's a huge attrition rate, surely.
I feel like this is also just a sampling of the entirety of the Unseen University. This is the 5 people who get together and have lunch together every day and then accidentally, save the world 15 times. But
Yeah.
There are other rankings of wizards who are, they pop up every now and again, and they're doing things in odd corners of the building, and I assume they are teaching classes. And this is like your leadership team who have risen above the need to actually do things. They've all got tenure, and they're just puttering around writing 5 pages of a document over 17 years.
This is the Chancellery.
Or 17 pages over 5 years. Sorry, credit where it's due.
Thinking about Tableosity.
Yeah.
I sometimes don't have like a clear sense of who the wizards are compared to each other. Like if you asked me to like very clearly define the senior wrangler versus the chair of indefinite studies, like I don't have a lot to work with there. But I tried to use this very small, condensed, quick bite to go like, okay, what are their personality types?
Oh yeah.
We all know the dean is like the most gung-ho and like
and impressionable.
Yeah. We know the dean, we know Ponder Stibbons, and we know Ridcully.
Yeah.
But for the other 3 main ones, I felt like the chair is kind of like the intellectual snob in this one. There's a couple of moments where he's like the most adamant against the other university, and also that they should let in students who aren't kind of top-notch. I thought the lecturer was the most peevishly undervalued, as in he was like, I do all this work. I've been writing this really incredible paper and no one's paying attention to it. Like he's very defensive in that. And for me, this one rang really true. I always remember this feeling that the senior wrangler is like the greatest shirker of responsibility or stepping up to the plate. He always seems to be the one who mumbles out of a situation. It's like, well, and kind of takes one large step back when it's who's ready to save the world. And in this, takes one large step back when it's, hey, let's just think about what we do as our job for 10 seconds. There's never a situation that he rises to.
I feel like this needs to be a chart, like a personality chart, like one of those like Dolly magazine ones. It's like, okay, so you're in a meeting, do you yes, no, and then it ends up with which one of these you are.
Well, now we have to make that chart, now that you've said this, Liz.
The issue of Dolly, which is like, what do you do in a meeting? Which fictional wizard are you? Is a great issue.
But those personality types are spot on. I think that's great. And now what I want to do, though, is I'm going to write them up. And then next time we read a book with all the wizards in, I'm going to be like, oh, does this hold up? I think it does. I think it's accurate. We got partway through the list because the things that he wanted them to do is, first of all, explain what they do, but also maybe get more students in. Can you advertise for students? Can you get more students? This will be beneficial for the city. Like, it'll bring money into the city. It'll elevate your prestige. And they're like, no. But I do want to say, Liz, you were talking before that you think they still have students now because of the whole thing with the teacher who set traps. I think that's from when the Arch-Chancellor was a student. I don't think that's current. And I think all the things that they think about being a student are all from when they were students, because they deliberately, and as much as humanly possible, ignore the students who are currently in the university.
I am happy to put that aside, but I do think that the idea of these being like a little pocket of outside the actual day-to-day of the university theory that was raised holds true, and that there's still like university life happening below their like realm of interest. Yeah, so I think there would still be student, because there'll be lots of Nepo babies being born needing to go somewhere, and what Blaze at university is not going to take them all.
No, that's true. But the main time we saw students last was when Ponder was a student, when he sat the exam and got top marks because he accidentally got the exam meant for Victor Chuglebend. And that was also when Ridcully first became Arch-Chancellor. So we've seen, Ponder rise since then to the position he's in now, where he's got 2 jobs. And I love the way they describe his jobs, because he's the head of inadvisably applied magic, which we already knew, but he's also the university's prelector, which it says is a position interpreted in Unseen University as the one who gets given the tedious job. So he's actually doing the stuff. And I think he's the interface between this group, which I think you're absolutely right, Liz, is this sort of microcosm of let's not do anything, and the rest of the university where things actually have to happen.
So I think there's still students.
Yeah.
Even if they don't see them.
Well, Ponder seems to have students in the high energy magic building, particularly in the early Science of Discworld books, particularly the first one. And any time you see Hex in the earlier books where Hex is in, you have that little group of clearly the nerdy computer science students, which I can totally, having been a nerdy computer science student at one point in my life, I could totally relate to all of them. I was like, yeah, I know who these guys are. The wizards, like computer science when I studied it, not a very quality-driven, diverse group of people. Like, they're all men, for starters, which is on the Discworld a thing, because if you do magic and you're a woman, you're a witch, except in one notable circumstance. But they say, let's attract young men who would not normally consider wizarding as a profession. And then later on, they're like, oh, but I think actually he's just trying to say, because of circumstance, they wouldn't be able to do it. Not that they would be no good at it. They never say, what, they're going to make us take girls? Like, they don't. But I kind of feel like that should have been where it was going.
I thought that was what was being implied.
Mm.
It is interesting because it's, what it means to have like active, diverse kind of hiring is very, I don't know, even different now than it was when this story was written.
That's true.
I think quotas or different methods for ensuring that whatever your population is within a space is better representative of the population of the greater space, it runs in a different way. But I like that even with a lack of definition as to what diversity means, we get diversity in the watch is always like, and, jumping back to Thud, like, let's get a vampire in. That this is so undefined and they're still so incredulous about the whole thing. It could just be people who, like, I don't know, earn, like, their family has this amount of less money, or it could be people whose names start with X, Y, and Z because we don't have enough of those to, like, make the alphabet lists even on the list of students. But they're just rejecting the idea that there should be any change in the process.
Yeah. And it's interesting that they both say that there are entrance requirements of some sort, but they also have this great... Rick Kelly has a great line. He says, no, we'll stick to an intake of 100% young fools, because they're like, oh, we're not going to take like 40% people who maybe aren't as good at magic as you would expect, because actually we want to take 100% of people who don't know what they're doing. Bring them in stupid, send them away clever. That's the UU way, he says, which kind of helps to explain a question that a few people have asked us in previous episodes of how did Rincewind get into this place? And I think in our headcanon, he's probably the poor eighth son of an eighth son who seem to get in by default. They just accept those people because they have to. It's part of how wizarding works. But now there's other magical institutions, there's other colleges. Those people can go somewhere else. And the university don't appear to have noticed a slacking off in how many people come through their door to learn magic.
Does that suggest that they don't pay to go there because they haven't suffered any impact to their coffers? Or they're just not, because the bursar would notice that, surely. If so. Well,
at this point, the bursar noticed that.
Well, it always seems to me that it's implied he is still perfectly capable of doing his job no matter what else happens. Like, the books of the university are still balanced no matter how divorced from reality he becomes.
No, I think he's high functioning in one area is how the bursing happens, but nothing much else does. That's what the frog pills are for.
Yeah, but it seems like someone must be paying for it because, again, if we remember Victor Tugelbend, he's on a scholarship provided by an uncle. So
if the bursar said to Rid Cully, oh, we're not having as much money, would he notice? Would he, or is that just in one of the stacks of paper that he's not reading?
Well, yeah, that's true. They don't have, they've got the bursar and they've got Ponder, but they're kind of doing their own thing. There's nobody who works directly for Rid Cully who says, so these are the important things you really need to know about. Who he listens to.
But they have this meeting. It's implied every Thursday they have this meeting. So
yeah, can you imagine? I think for all of them it's great, except for Ponder, for whom Thursday is perpetually a hell of him trying to get them to do anything that they need to do. Do you get that impression?
He's the one in charge of the agenda. He's the one who reads through the notes. You know that person in the meeting. And they're like, so we should start the meeting. And then another person's like, what type of biscuits did we get? And then it's, well, hang on, I don't like those biscuits. And then it's 15 minutes in and Ponder is still like, could we start the meeting? Like, could we just begin it? And then, like, we could make biscuits an agenda item, but we haven't begun it. Yeah. I remember we went through a period at work of having like a COVID task force, which went on and on and on. And in some ways was fantastic and very helpful and, did a lot of great work. And then at another point became a meeting which was like, yes, we all agree that COVID still exists. And nothing else had changed within what we could do about it.
Yeah.
So then we ticked that one off as a, like a record 3.5 minute meeting. And then had it in the calendar for an hour next week.
I very much relate to that. Oh God.
Do you relate to that sometimes when trying to, say, steer a podcast to a certain structure and some people are just going off on tangents about all kinds of things?
You very well may think that, but I couldn't possibly comment. What I do want to comment on, though, is that I think as we get towards the end of the short story, we'll go through, because there's some great lines. I think we want to read out some of these before we get on to some great questions that you've sent in, listener. They're fantastic. But I think the thing that I want to ask
Listen
you
to that steering.
is as they get towards the end and it says there's this and there's this, they only sort of bring up about 4 or 5 of the things that are on the list. And then Reed Kelly's like, anything else? And Stevens is like, lots, sir. Lots and lots. Like, it's clearly a big list. What else do you think Pessimal's got on that list? Like, what else is he asking them? Because we never find out. Because this is when they, as you alluded to in our opening, Liz, they basically deal with it by deferring it to a committee, which means someone else will have to deal with it, and we'll put it on the agenda for next year to see what the committee has got up to, or indeed if it's been formed. But what do you think? What do you think is on his list?
So you've got, are they publishing? What are their student numbers? And a little bit about just like, if you're not publishing, what are you doing?
Yeah, what are you actually doing there? Yeah. And something about ethics and do you have an ethics committee?
They have an ethics committee.
Which they reject. They don't have ethics, so there's no need for the committee.
Yeah. I mean, which is not true.
Probably some very specific things about people on staff. Like, what is this person specific? What purpose do they serve? Maybe some specific budgetary line items around food and how many meals are had per day.
That it needs a year just to document that.
Maybe a whole section on what is presumably a long list of missing peoples in the university, having just disappeared off into other realms and things. Why is your librarian an orangutan?
Yep.
I mean, a question to get someone in a lot of trouble, but sure.
I feel like he'd have a lot of that. It'd just get down to some nitty gritty things. Like, it starts off with the big picture stuff, but then there'd be a section of like long, specific questions.
I think there'd be the university's impact on the city as a whole. What, like, maybe there's a question about like, what are you doing for visitors to the city? Should there be some like aspect of tourism involved with the university if it is something which benefits from the city's name and reputation?
What KPIs do you adhere to on a quarterly basis?
Yep.
What sort of culture and morale are you creating as an institution and organization, especially for young people? Are you thinking of putting on concerts in the quad?
Oh, I like that.
I would love to see the reaction to that suggestion in this meeting room.
I guess the dean would be into it and everyone else might think no.
Yeah, I can imagine Rid Cully would have mixed feelings about it. He'd probably initially be like, yes, get them out in the fresh air. Yeah. And then he'd be like, they're doing what, though? Are they running around? Is it physical?
Maybe a section on health and safety.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Imposing a limit on how many times you can do the rite of Ashka Ente per year?
Yeah. Is it dangerous that you keep summoning death? I think we're going to see some of this stuff, I think, in the Science of Discworld 4, which we haven't got to yet. Because I think in that one, we do see a bit of the university interacting with things outside the university. Whereas in the previous 3 Science of Discworld books, it's all about them and the Round World project. Whereas in the 4th one, there's other people getting interested in that. So I think this is sort of a through line that develops by the time we get to that. I wonder if there's not a big question around what they're doing for the benefit of the city in terms of, like, you've got all this magic. What have you done for the city lately? To which their answer is probably like, well, we haven't blown it up or made it vanish. And he's like, well, what about
most of it?
Yeah, most of it. What about Mayday Street or whatever it's called? Yeah, so I think that'd have to be a big component of it. I mean, look, this might be me thinking back to our own recent political history in Australia of the tests that the government wanted to impose on all university research to decide if it was in the public interest. But, you know, rather than a committee, independent committee deciding that, the minister would decide it, or some horrible change that they tried to put through. Yeah, I feel like there's something like that the patrician might dangle over the university.
I also think that there might be, how can they help with diplomacy, and would they consider doing exchange programs for these universities elsewhere? And maybe are there any student-led initiatives that could come into play? So, I mean, thinking back to my uni days, we had things like International Food Fiesta and like charity things as well, but International Food Fiesta to celebrate the diversity of cultures and through food of all the different people in Unseen University would be quite funny, as there's just like 20 stalls of the same thing.
17 of them would just be cabbage from the Stolat Plains.
Yeah, it's not really, I mean, they keep talking about, and again, you know, this sort of goes back to what the history of the university is throughout the books. It's always described as the premier college of magic, but it's never described as the only one. And yet, I can't think of a single instance, apart from when we finally meet the people from Bresnik College, of us ever meeting a wizard from anywhere else. There's one very important exception, of course, for its own bugger-up university, led by Arch-Chancellor Bill Rincewind, where they probably have a very different kind of hex debt. Like, even the ones who've left the university and gone on to have a career studied there, like Cutwell in Mort. Like, he set up his shop in Stolat, but he's from Unseen University. That's where he studied. And he never really does much in the way of magic either. So I wonder if it's the case that lots of people study to be a wizard, but not all of them can actually do much magic. And it's not necessarily an impediment depending on the kind of thing that they want to do as a job afterwards.
Yeah, I like that.
You mean like getting a law degree and working in advertising?
Yeah, or comedy, which is what happens to most of the people with a law degree that I know.
Yeah, so that people go out and just sort of quietly have wizard qualifications they don't use.
Doctor of Thaumatology.
But it's about changing how you think, right? That's kind of what their whole thing is as well.
Yeah.
If you send them out knowing how to think.
You were talking about marketing, though. That was one of Cutwell's things. This is kind of a new magic I've invented. I call it advertising. Yeah, so clearly that's the angle. Look, I don't know if there's much to say else about the story itself, except maybe to look at some favourite bits before we get into some questions.
I just had one favourite phrase, which was definition by hubbub. Again, flashbacks to so many meetings where linguistic specificity takes over any concept of like larger ideas or the point of a conversation. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Especially when the person who brings it up has the answer to what the thing means, but everybody else decides that they will decide collectively what it means. And by collectively, I mean like by volume of voice. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I enjoy the bit where everyone's just blustering over trying to define what it is they do and also trying not to do it because they can't, but also they feel they shouldn't have to. But I enjoy no wizard worth his salt tells other wizards what he's up to, snapped the lecturer in recent runes. Besides, how can you measure thinking? You can count the tables a carpenter makes, but what kind of rule could measure the amount of thought necessary to define the essence of tableosity? I just feel like I've had so many conversations where people are saying words that sound smart but are actually nothing, and that's just such a nice distillation of it.
Yeah.
Tableosity.
I do like that.
That's beautiful.
There's so many good little gags in this, but I think my favourite one is quite near the start, where Ridcully is talking about the fact that Pessimal's been appointed. He says, anyway, gentlemen, his lordship has appointed a Mr. A.E. Pessimal, a man of whom I know little, as Inspector of Universities. His job, I suspect, is to drag us kicking and no doubt screaming into the century of the fruit bat. That was, in fact, the last century, Arch-Chancellor, said Ponder. Well, we are hard to drag and very good at kicking, said Ridcully. I just thought that was such a good comeback from him, not knowing what century he's in. And I like how Pratchett also reuses Century of the Fruit Bat, because I think it's his favourite one, without telling us what the actual current century is. It's like, it doesn't matter.
Oh, has there never been an update? I did know we were past the Century of the Fruit Bat.
I am pretty sure it has actually been mentioned. I think it's...
Is there an anchovy?
Yeah, Century of the Anchovy. Yes, you're right. I couldn't remember if that was the century or one of the many years. which they still declare a new one every year, which I find endlessly endearing. We're about to, as you are listening to this, listener, it is now newly the year of the querulous megapode. So enjoy that. Yeah, but there's so many good little lines. I mean, this is the thing, you read a Pratchett short story and there should be probably, you'd think, 6 or 7 really good gags in it, but there's always 2 or 3 times that number. And you're like, how is this possible?
What I really like about this story is just how it gives us a chance to apply a different lens to Discworldy stuff. So the idea of both the committee meeting. So now I want the short story, which is about the decision to call it the Century of the Anchovy. How did they come to that decision? And also the kind of bookkeeping and how that works with a whole bunch of stuff, which makes, the amount of world building needed for us to understand how the Guild of Assassins works to then apply bookkeeping to that, or the Guild of Fools.
Yeah.
It's just nice. It's so nice anytime an extra bit of, I guess it points out, if you're trying to build an entire world, you can do it really successfully without adding in government oversight or report keeping or committee meetings, which might point to the fact that they're not essential in an actual world. How much fun it is to add them back into a world.
Do you think the other guilds have these? Does the Assassin's Guild have a version of this, and does it run exactly the same, or is it a lot more like the guy wandering around with a baseball bat, at a mafia?
I feel like Pezimil has been sent out to a few places and, finds his home in the Watch, but maybe he's been doing this for a while. You wouldn't start with the university, surely.
No, you'd have to work your way up.
The guild of, I don't know, hat makers or...
The Musicians Guild?
Well, no, they're dangerous.
Horrendously dangerous.
Yeah.
Right. Seamstresses?
Also quite dangerous.
Dangerous, but I think would handle a committee better than this.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Well, on that note, should we take some questions from our own set of inspectors of podcasts and recappers? We got some great questions. Thank you for everyone who's sending questions. I think we're going to be able to cover all of these. They're good. And a couple of people wrote questions that we really need to read out in full because they spent a bit of time thinking about how they were going to put their question, and I'm very impressed. But Liz, which one are we going to start with?
Let's start with this one from Molokov, which is a beautiful question that I think is designed to get right into the core of ourselves as people and possibly alienate our friends. So I'll read out both parts of it. All right. So, which of the committee members matches your personality the most? I'm probably most ponder, so wanting to get things organized and done. And 2, do you know an AE pessimal? Are they annoying, useful, or a bit of both?
Do we all... I feel like all 3 of us have at least a bit of ponder in us. Am I off the mark by saying that?
I think I'm a red cully.
Oh, really?
I do like going into a meeting with a sense of look, this is a chance for us to throw some things around and see what sticks, which I think is a real Red Cully attitude. Literally, I feel like his office is full of things he's thrown around to see what sticks on the wall. But that kind of good-natured, this is the space we've been invited to, so let's just, why not enjoy it and have a biscuit while we're here? Yeah, I don't dislike his attitude towards the meeting at all. He barely says no to anything, and then the things he does, he says in a funny way. So
That's true. That's true.
I think I would like to be both a Ponder and a Red Cully merged, but neither of you have actually had the misfortune of being in a meeting that I am running, and I run it like an aggressive military operation. Generally, I'm we're getting this done. We're not doing any tangents. Here's what's happening. We're not having a nice time. Laughs happen afterwards. We've done the thing. Goodbye. Now the chats are happening. So that's not something I love about my personality, but I also like to get the boring thing done and then have a nice time.
Does that mean you're the AE pessimal, Liz?
Oh my God. So yes, now you both know an AE pessimal. And that answers part 2.
Yeah.
This is only if I'm running the meeting. If I'm in the meeting, you can't do that unless you're the one in charge, because that's rude, right?
Okay. Well, I have a lot of questions about our meetings that we have for this podcast, but we'll talk about those afterwards. That's not really on the agenda.
No, it's more like if there's like a time-sensitive thing that you need to get done. I make it sound like I come in and I'm like, everyone have a terrible time, sit on the floor until like it's not like that, but it's more like, okay, quick, let's get the things done, and then we can all go out and have a drink or a meal.
Are you saying it's not a terrible time because you allow people to have a chair, Liz? Is that your benchmark?
Yeah, that's the main thing. Benchmark, literally. It has to be a hard one so they're focused. No comfy chairs.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Look, I feel like I do identify most strongly with Ponder because in most meetings I am not in charge. I don't really get to decide how things are done, but I do kind of have an idea of how I think they should be done, but I can't usually persuade anyone to do it. Certainly in meetings of big organizations that I've been involved in, that has often been the role that I feel that I've had. So yes, I think I agree with you, Molkov. I am mostly Ponder.
Horrified to learn that apparently I'm a pessimal, but I will take that.
Look, with the larger like Pessimal doesn't do anything bad in Thud. Pessimal's just doing their job and asking quite reasonable questions that we all agreed, like, yes, please apply these to a police force. Yeah. And while it's fantastic Pessimal found out that they had some untapped berserker rage and they can apply that to the benefits of a citizenry, I don't think that discounts what a Pessimal brings to these sorts of bureaucratic situations. And so for all the Pessimals out there, Liz included, I'm grateful for what they bring.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if it's berserker rage.
Sometimes it's what you need, particularly in a committee meeting. But I think
people start moving comfy chairs, you have to bring it out.
Yeah.
But look, to answer the second part of that question, are they annoying, useful, or a bit of both? I think they're mostly useful. And if at all, only a bit annoying.
It's a bit of both.
Okay.
Because if it wasn't annoying, then it wouldn't be a peevish character, would it?
Well, all right. Yeah, fair enough. But I do think, and
he doesn't peeve me.
No, and I actually felt that Vimes gives him a really uncalled for rough time. Like he's just like, because he's just reacting. He's just like, someone's coming in here telling me my business. I'm going to treat him like dirt. You're like, no, mate, you need some oversight. If anything, the things that you're doing in this book show you need some oversight. You need someone to look at what you're doing and make sure that you're doing it right. You think your oversight is the only oversight you need. But of course you would think that you're you. And that's not how it works. So I felt very much that Pessimal was hard done by. And even Vimes, starts to regret how he's treated him during that scene where he parades him in front of the other special constables. You could see him going, oh, you don't really have to be out here. And he's like, no, I shall do it. You're like, okay, all right. And that was before he went the full berserk, I guess.
Just bite a troll. Just normal things.
Troll bite. What a good name, Troll Biter. That's a good deed name. Well done.
That's probably his MSN name.
Probably.
I mean, you can change your MSN name. It's fine. The next question comes from Avril via Discord. Do we think the university will successfully hold off Veterinaria's desire for it to be dragged kicking and screaming into the century of the fruit bat? Forming a committee as a delaying tactic is a time-honoured tradition, but would the patrician accept it?
I think we chatted about this. I don't think the patrician expects much to come from this. I think this is one of the ones where going through the act or the motions does the job that's needed, which is a reminder to everybody that there are a certain way that things need to be done. And, he's dragged in Ridcully for a meeting or pleasantly invited him to a meeting with the idea that if he doesn't show up, there'll be trouble before, and kind of gets his way with it anyway. I think this is a nice reminder.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Yeah. I think the next time he needs them to do something, the thought that, oh yeah, we haven't reported on that thing yet. If he chases that up, he's kind of got the upper hand now. I think that's enough. I'd agree with that.
Yeah, 6 steps ahead in chess. Never about what the actual thing is we're talking about.
Yeah.
All right, for the next 2 questions, Ben, are you happy to read them? Because there's a bit of a voice acting element involved, and I have this voice, and I use it for everything.
That's all right.
Liz, which Discworld characters do you feel comfortable lending your voice to?
Maybe Death?
Okay.
Perhaps Vimes.
Okay.
Maybe Susan.
Death of Rats?
No. Oh, maybe, depending on the day. If the mood strikes me.
Okay. That seems reasonable.
Good question, though. I'm going to think about that.
Yes. Well, look, this is from Joel Molan via Discord, this question. It's certainly written in a character. I suspect as Pesimal, but maybe just Joel feels like he fits right into the Discworld. I don't know. But anyway, I'll do my best to read it.
Or do you want me to do it? Because I have just noticed it is as Pesimal, and if that's
who I am. No, I think you should do it. I need to
give it a red hot go.
Stretch your range, Liz. Show us what you got.
Yeah, give it a go.
You've seen what I've got. Your Graces, I hope you will not mind, as soon as possible, giving me the answers to the following questions. 1. What is Rincewind for? Why are you employing a known petty coward? 2. I timed several wizards digging up a Broadway earlier, and in the span of 1 hour, they cast no spells. Why was this an economic use of their time? 3. The level of violence used by your wizards against wizards seems excessive. Can you please comment upon this?
Joel, this is brilliant. I love this question. Thank you, Liz, too. That was brilliant. That was great.
Thank you, Joel.
What is Rincewind for? I mean, we know what he did. As we know from the Science of Discworld books, he kind of accumulates titles that nobody else wants. He ends up with something like 20 titles by the time of the Science of Discworld 3. It's very silly. But why do you think they really keep him around? Like they could expel him or fire him, I guess, now that he's an employee. They don't seem to really pay him much apart from feeding and housing him.
Isn't it as a coward we know that he's a survivor? Because it gets to a point where the university starts applying him to situations where, there's a very slim chance that anyone could actually survive it. So you may as well throw this constant survivor at them.
He's expendable also in that sense, I guess.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's certainly why they're quite happy to send him to the Counterweight continent. And it's certainly why they send him into Roundworld during the first Science of Discworld book. And he has proved himself quite useful, like particularly, and I keep talking about Science of Discworld books here, but they really are the main books where you see him as part of the faculty. And particularly the second and third one, and to a lesser extent, the first one, I feel like he really is important in those books. Like he really knows what's going on in a way that the other wizards just don't.
I think he's important from our viewpoint, and he is actually important. I still don't think they see him that way. I suspect that quite simply in terms of why he's kept on at Unseen University is it's inconvenient to fire him, or no one has noticed that he's there, is possibly why he is still around. Also, he's good at translating, so he's probably useful for that because of all his languages.
That's true.
I also think there's that Rid Cully is so blunt that people mistake him for being stupid, but I think he understands the kind of real world knowledge that Rincewind brings to a situation. If you've got someone who's literally called the chair and hasn't moved from the room for, I'm guessing like 3.5 decades, then I think it is sometimes helpful to have someone in a conversation who can speak to what it is like outside the walls of UU.
Yep. I think describing as a known petty coward is a bit rough. I mean, the patrician has seen him in action in The Last Hero, more or less invites him on the mission. He doesn't wish to volunteer, but he is volunteering because he knows if he doesn't volunteer, he'll end up on it anyway. Like he's also, I mean, his genre savviness is also off the charts. He really knows, although not like Granny Weatherwax, who can see stories even if she's not necessarily part of them. He always knows kind of what role he's destined to play, and he doesn't like it, but he's aware of it. He knows he's got to be the underdog at the university. He's got to be the one who actually gets the shitty jobs that no one else wants. And if they find him, they'd have to, find people for those 20 titles that he's ended up with.
Who's the wizard who knows a lot about stories? I'm trying to remember which book that's from.
Oh, yeah, there is one, isn't there? I don't remember who that is. We'll have to look that up. Is it the one Going Postal?
Sorry, there is a wizard who is fantastic at knowing stories and narrative and that. And I feel like that is the wizard who answered that question in Pesimal's report. Because we went so meta in what Rincewind is for that only a wizard who sees things through the lens of narrative would be able to answer it just like that.
Okay.
And he'd get a whole new title for doing this, probably.
Almost certainly. What about question number 2? A time several wizards digging up Broadway. And they cast no spells. Now, I think this might be a reference to when they were burying, what's his name? The really old wizard who dies at the start of Recommend. Wendell Poons, yeah. I think this is a reference to when they bury him at the crossroad of Broadway and another street because they're trying to make him die properly. But they did it without magic.
Surely the answer would be that, yes, you could dig up a road faster using magic, but to patch up all the fallout from using that magic would take much longer, and thus just doing it without magic is overall a more economic use of their time.
Yeah. Also, get out there, wield a shovel, old man. Get some air into the windbags.
100%. Also, I can see, Ponder would probably, answer this with mathematics. He's like, look, in order to shift 13 cubic feet of the Earth, you would have to displace 13 cubic feet of similarly dense matter. And he'd explain it in scientific terms, which they'd be like...
The irony of using up so much more wizard time to answer this question.
Now that feels very you.
Yeah.
Yeah, get every single one of them to file their own individual report specialized in their area on why. That would be just beautiful.
Now, what about the wizard on wizard violence referred to in this question? I mean, I feel like this is a throwback more to the early days of Unseen University. You don't see much of this in the modern UU.
Simple. I disagree with the premise. It isn't excessive. Next question.
Or what's the alternative? Wizard on civilian violence?
Has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Does it?
Yeah, well, it's like how matter, it can neither be created nor destroyed. There's a finite amount of wizard violence, and it has to be used.
Okay, could they use it on inanimate objects?
What, blowing up streets and such? I don't think that's very good for the community, is it?
Okay.
I don't know what this voice is, but it's happening.
All right, I don't want to ask that voice any more questions.
Character work there, Liz.
The inner pessimals coming out.
Yeah.
Or possibly someone else.
You could be the chair of indefinite characters.
Just new avenues for me. No.
All right. We'll blow up that street before it gets wrong for you.
This last one's also very well written. Thank you to Steve Lay, who wrote this on Twitter. Not in the voice of a specific... Well, it does have the voice of a specific character in it, but I feel like, Steve, you really put some effort into trying to write in the Pratchett style, and I really enjoyed this. Liz, do you want to read this one out?
I absolutely do not.
Okay.
I'd love it if you would, because I just do not feel I'd do it justice.
Right. I can do a veterinary if we're digging around.
Oh, well, yeah. Please do. Please do, man.
All right. Veterinary Peter Drumknot thoughtfully. What if, he said slowly, we cut all grants to the university and the guilds and make them compete for scraps of a much smaller total sum? I'm sure Mr. von Lipwig would be amenable to setting up a Ankh-Morpork Research Council.
That was very good. That was very good.
Yes, very good.
Thank you very much.
Oh, pleasure. And then Steve, who wrote the question, follows it up by saying, yes, it's not a question, but am I alone in seeing where this was headed?
I'd read the hell out of that book.
It would be an interesting book. Do you think that is where it would head? I mean, we've already discussed that the university is not funded by the city, so the equivalent to taking away their funding is making them pay taxes. Would that work for the other guilds? Because, I mean, they also are not funded by the city. They're funded by their own activities, but they presumably do pay taxes. Like, it seems like only the university is exempt from tax because at several points during the books, the patrician does hold, whether or not they've paid the correct amount of tax over them, it seems. But, I mean, you could do this, though. You can make them compete in some other way, for sure.
So things we know is that veterinary, hates a monopoly and hates when something stymies progress. So I was thinking, is it possible that with these kind of slightly new emergence of different universities, that he sees this as a natural evolution, that kind of a variety of educational options should be allowed and given? And if the university is, going to be a real stick in the mud about that process, then it might be time to lean in with a little bit of bureaucracy as a weapon of mass annoyance and just see how that stirs things around.
Yeah.
And as always, popping moist as the arrowhead on that weapon.
Because he could sell it in a way that makes it work also.
Yeah. I mean, because some of the guilds are the traditional kind of educational organizations. Like we know about the Assassin School, but we also know that Jeremy Clarkson was brought up through the Clockmakers Guild. There's a school attached to the Fools Guild. There's a school attached to the Musicians Guild. So, yeah, you could do it with the other guilds, or you could just do it, as you say, with the other magical schools that are clearly coming. It could happen.
I would also really enjoy a series of short stories just of the different grant applications written by specific characters, just to see how they approach some of the really mundane, tedious questions. Because I think that would be a really interesting character study, and also just good humor potential. Because like Moist would absolutely know how to write a grant. Like he would figure out how to do it in all the right ways. But just like Nanny Og throwing her hat in the ring, being like, you didn't say that we weren't eligible. So it's just, I think there's just some great potential there for a few little things.
Yeah, like references and reportabilities would be like our Jason. You just jot that at the bottom of it.
Yes.
Our Jason and add a stretch, our Sean.
That would be great. I feel like that would be a balm to the soul for all of us who have ever had to write a grant application to try and do anything.
Yeah, they're a cruel and unusual punishment.
Look, I think that brings us to the end of our discussion of a Collegiate casting out, unless there's any last thoughts we've got about that story before we revisit the world of Thud.
Just one final thought was I wasn't ready to feel so seen and attacked in a short story. Because it was just so accurate. It was just so well done. So, yeah, and I stick by what we said earlier, where it does feel like just a normal committee meeting, one of his like Society of Author ones, with the name swapped out.
We want to revisit Thud because we had so many good questions and we just didn't get to that many of them. I think the main thing for me, before we get onto the specific questions, that I would have loved to spend some more time talking about is what it says about policing. Because by this time, and Matt, you mentioned this, it really feels like Vimes has become the establishment. Whereas in the previous books, he's always, sort of the working class underdog who's done good. Like he's, come into this money and position, but he's using it to fight on behalf of the ordinary people. Thud is like the book where it really feels he's not in that position anymore, as much as he might want to think he is. He's the fuzz. He's the man, to use the phrase. That puts a lot of what he does, particularly with a modern understanding of policing and the problems therein, in kind of a different light. I know this is ground that we sort of covered in The Fifth Elephant. I talked a lot in that episode about the bit at the end where he tricks Wolfgang into blowing himself up and kills him, but does it by the book so that it's okay and he can walk away with clean hands. And I found that a bit off-putting, even though, he was a literal monster. But that's such a rarity in Pratchett's writing that he makes someone a literal monster who must actually be destroyed. It's usually much gentler than that. Like, even if you look at someone like the Count de Magpie in Carpe Jugulum, I mean, he gets killed at the end, but he gets killed as a vampire. We know he'll come back in like a century and hopefully have learned his lesson. And he doesn't kill off a lot of his villains. Or if he does, Yeah,
he's not Disney.
Well, he does do it in a Disney way sometimes, but not quite the same way.
There's quite a few which are like twists of fate. I'm thinking of the Hitmen in The Truth, where they get melted upon, or smelted, I guess.
Yeah.
And they still get the ending that they deserve. Yeah. Because one of them is actually genuinely like in his core redeemable and the other one isn't. So it's still like within their control.
Or the thugs in Hogfather. I think that's really an interesting look at how different people meet their deaths and, again, like what is deserved in death. There is a lot of like characters dying and baddies dying, I guess. But you're right. It's not usually by the execution of the hero's hand.
Yeah. And it was a circumstance where it felt he's going to do this to himself, but only because I've engineered it so. The reason I wanted to bring this up is because one of the questions we didn't get to from Zoe via Discord about Thud is that she finds it's harder and harder for her to reread the Vimes books without thinking about the police structure and Vimes' absolute disregard for some basic policing rules. And she directly asks, I don't think that Pratchett meant it this way, but are these books propaganda, the modern, it's probably not that modern. I don't know how long it's been around, but, the portmanteau for cop propaganda.
Vintage Sewing says that if it's in the last 30 years, then it's modern.
Okay. Well, there you go. It probably is modern then. But, this idea that all these TV shows that we've seen over the last few decades, which are all about, cops like solving crimes and saving people, which have always shown cops in a very good light. And until relatively recently, there haven't been a lot that have really seriously dealt with corruption and systemic problems in police forces because they wanted to have a simple good guys versus bad guys narrative of cops and robbers that have taught us that's what we should think about cops when we know that's not the practical reality for a lot of people. So what do you think about this? How does particularly Thud, but all of those watch books come across as a whole?
I feel that there's a couple of things which don't make Vimes' actions read as they don't stick out in the same way they do in Thud for me. One is that we see the modernization of the city kind of at the same time as the books progress. So the Ankh-Morpork of Guards and Men-at-Arms is really different to the Ankh-Morpork of Thud. Things like cultural awareness and sensitivity and acceptance are introduced in a timeline that we're a part of.
Mm.
And Vimes' attitudes don't stick out as old-fashioned or insulting or contemptible in those early books because he is a product of that space. And it's kind of, he doesn't modernize at the same time as the city does. And I think that's really interesting that, because that's obviously not Pratchett's thinking. Except that he created a purposely backwards thinking space in those early books and then allowed it to modernize to a point where certain characters just sat within it awkwardly because of their philosophies.
Mm.
Yeah, I think Vimes can't evolve. He can only soften, if that makes sense. So as we see in things like Night Watch, you see him being shaped into the kind of policeman he is, one that in the context of the watch at that time has morals and ethics and a sense of the greater good. And that sort of solidifies into a very specific person who then moves through the ranks and is hard and he can't really cope with the world. That's why he has all his drinking and all of those issues. He meets Sybil and he softens. He has young Sam and he softens. But I think the core of who he is and the core of what he thinks policing is too set to change in pace with the society around him. And that doesn't necessarily make him bad, but it means that as things progress, it's going to not go at the same trajectory. So if these books had continued, we'd have continued to see Sam at a specific spot and the watch, and maybe people like Carrot changing more with it.
Yeah, Carrot always seems excited about what modern times are bringing to things.
Yeah.
And I think it is just different attitudes, different personality types. And it is that thing of, we did talk about it in that other episode, but his two most psychologically developed characters of Vimes and Granny Weatherwax are like incredibly rigid people who are being forced to reconsider their ideas in a world. And the question is whether or not you think that they are actually reconsidering it or just being forced to have obstacles.
Yeah. I think they can become gentler, but their underlying philosophy will not move.
Yeah.
And it's formed in response to a society that no longer exists in the same way.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of interesting complications to how I've thought about this issue since we last kind of visited it in Fifth Elephant. I think one of them is Night Watch. When Vimes goes back that 30 years, a lot of the things that we think of as being quite a part of the modern policing of the watch are in place. Like they have paperwork, they have expectations about chain of custody, evidence. And it's not shown that that police force is, that the guards then, as opposed to how they're portrayed in Guards, it's not shown that they're radically different. Like the atmosphere is different and there's this whole other branch which is clearly, the worst of the police, like as an extension of the state, doing violence on behalf of the state. And then Vimes is sort of this antidote to that where he says, no, we're going to be for the people, to the point where, they are helping an insurrection against the government because that's what is going to protect the people, not, doing what the government says. And that's kind of an interesting thing. But at the same time, there's not that evolution anymore. Like it shows this continuation of the watch. But I think the other thing, and I think I have said this in previous episodes, that really I always come back to is it's not the same coming from an English author or from an English perception of policing, because the TV image and indeed the real life image and reality, hopefully, although we know it still has problems in the UK, But the police force in the UK is different. Like, we haven't seen this massive militarization. They are supposed to be trained to de-escalate situations rather than shoot people. Putting people in handcuffs is not a first option for British police training, at least. And of course, there are systemic issues of racism and sexism and everything else in British police culture, I'm sure, as there are in Australian police culture and around the world. But it's not quite the same. And certainly when you see the way that English policing is portrayed in popular culture, when you look at something like The Bill, that's a real different idea of what police means than something like CSI or Law and Order SVU or something like that.
They absolutely seem worlds apart. Like, can you imagine like a policeman from The Bill talking to a policeman from CSI? Like, what that conversation would be like? What would they talk about?
Yeah. It's difficult. I mean, you see it sometimes in fiction. You know, I always think of Rivers of London, which is also a series that could be questioned in terms of propaganda. And I think it sort of it deals with it more head on. I mean, for starters, if you haven't read them, they are urban fantasy. So they're set in kind of a realistic modern day London, and they do directly address some systemic issues. And it has quite a diverse cast of characters too, which helps. But that could also be argued that it shows the police in the best possible light. But I think, yeah, they are very different. But then you could also say that the way in which the British police are portrayed, it makes them less like these. It's not that they're not portrayed in a positive light. It's that they're portrayed in a more down-to-earth, realistic, like they're just your local guy who's there to help you kind of thing, rather than the kind of action hero perspective you get from a lot of police narratives that come out of the US. And in Australia, we get much more, I think, closer to the UK idea when we have local police drama or stories.
We don't even like, the only one I can think of is Blue Heelers, and that's like, oh, let's talk about this, like these 5 police out at Mount Thomas police station who are all married to each other or married to Julie from the pub, and it's a soap opera where most of the cast happen to be police. Like, it's not really a police show.
We did have like Police Rescue and Water Rats, I guess, in the 80s and 90s, which had a little bit more of that action-y feel to it. Like characters, Water Rats, I remember, just were constantly jumping off their boat, if before it did dock properly.
Like some kind of water rat.
Now I'm seeing it, Liz.
That makes sense.
Who famously have boats, like the animals that are rats.
Yeah.
Yeah, rats always messing about in boats.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen Wind in the Willows.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Ben, that like the pop culture way that, you know, the Edgar Wright film Hot Fuzz is really sending that up, where you've got, what if we applied American blockbuster ideas of policing to what most policing is in England, which is small town, village style. You know, absolutely everybody, and you just walk around saying hi to them each day. Yeah.
A Heartbeat. Oh my God, it's always green grass. But we'll never get in for anything.
Yeah.
I watched Heartbeat religiously as a child, so I assume that everyone just understands my reference.
Oh, yeah. No, I understand. But look, I think, you know, to flip that on its head a little, I think there is an element of the police are never shown to be the bad guys. Like, you don't even really get corrupt police officers except in the past of Nightwatch.
You did?
Well, I mean, no, you do in the Bill. I mean, in the Pratchett books. Like, okay. They're very few and far between. And where they are, they're like, you know, they're villains who get kicked out. So it's always the police are sorting it out. And you never really see them from the other side, except maybe in The Truth, where, you know, the press is trying to do its job and the police are like, don't mess with this. So I guess where I end up is I wouldn't think of them as propaganda, but I do think that by contributing to the sort of larger pop culture narrative of cops are the good guys, they don't counter that.
But all of the books are kind of like, it depends on where you're standing, right? Like in some of the books, as you point out, the police are the bad guys getting in the way of the journalists. And in some of the books, the journalists are the bad guys getting in the way of the police doing their jobs. So like, he doesn't seem to have qualms about flipping who seems to suck depending on who's looking at them.
But the police that we see are either very understandable, like they're not... Vimes has that thing where he's like, I'm allowed to be prejudiced because I'm prejudiced against everyone because I live in Ankh-Morpork and I've come up from the gutter and I will treat everyone awfully if I have to.
No, I think your point still stands. But yeah, it was just that really small thing about flipping perspective.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But the underlying thing is still like, it's overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah. So I think that's as close as it comes, but I don't think it doesn't necessarily paper over the issues as much. And I think that, yeah, it's certainly, from what we know, Pratchett's understanding of policing heavily influenced by his mate Bernard, the cunning artificer, who used to be a police officer. If I remember this rightly, I will check this for the episode notes. And so he would have had all these like stories of like a small town Bobby, you know, like a police officer in a small town in the UK, exactly like we were talking about in Heartbeat. And that's what he thinks policing is. So it's not really a surprise that that's what most of his books are like. And it's only occasionally, like in Night Watch, where there's the thing where they pretend to torture people and that's seen as being better than actually torturing them, even though somebody really believes they're going to be tortured, which you could argue is a form of psychological torture. There's little moments like that where it's like someone being clever, but not necessarily understanding that they're still doing great harm. But I think that's Pratchett not understanding it rather than trying to present it. In
Night Watch, he's pretend torturing a torturer. Like the gag in that book is that I can say some words which make you think of torture because you know what those words are meaning. Whereas in Thud, they are applying these tactics to a group of people who are just saying that we have laws which are different to your laws, even though we live within the same city limits. And I think that is where it's the real sticking point.
Yeah. Which is a great segue into Zoe's other question, which was in these later books, she feels like, particularly the later Vimes books, Pratchett's putting away the satire and the parody, and it's about something. And Thud, she feels at its core, is about religious extremism, which I think tracks. I mean, I think that's where the Deep Downer Dwarfs are shown as coming from. And she asks, given the situation in Iran and the United States currently regarding women's bodies, and also plenty of other things, is there a specific lesson we should be drawing from Thud about religious extremism? Sometimes I think Pratchett has these big themes that come up and he talks about them and he kind of points at something and goes, see, this is bad, but it's not always so easy to see what specific thing he's trying to say. And I think in the case of the Deep Downer Dwarfs, I think this is a good question. It's like, okay, well, religious extremism is bad, but what's the answer? Do we find a nice person in the religion? What if there isn't one? Or who decides who the nice person is? Where does that... Because as Avril talked about, you know, what's he trying to say about who Bashful Son is, you know, as the one nice person in this sort of extreme part of the dwarf religion, even though they say it's not a religion.
I don't think I can answer this question because I don't agree that it's about religious extremism. I think it's just about extremism overall. So I don't think I can engage with this question in the spirit in which it was asked, even though I think it's a great question.
Okay.
I think that what Pratchett is interested in doing in some of these books, the books which are a little bit more, you know, that they're not a straight parody or satire, they're a little bit more heady and conceptual in, let's think about a real gritty conflict point within societies that we live in, is that a lot of the time he's just bringing in complexity and differing points of view. And then within that sits a narrative. And I sometimes think, you know, you can follow the narrative and decide whether or not that's satisfying. And he's just using the context of this gritty social space, gritty as in crunchy and complex, not gritty as in remaking Batman for the 7th time.
Sure. With the lights turned off. Yeah.
With Superman dead. Yeah.
So when it's like, what can you take away from it? I think what I take away from his work and what I did in the earlier books and what I did when I was younger was just kind of like, things are more complex. There are more perspectives, that you have to think of things in a couple of ways at once, that you can't apply one set of rules to every situation. And just when you think you've locked on to like a rule with which to live your life, you will most likely bump into a person which makes you have to adjust those sets of rules. And, you know, in the best way, that's what like a character like Vimes has been doing up to Thud, is constantly having to just slightly reassess the boundaries that they've set for themselves and then include more and more and more into that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think for me, like, my answer is probably slightly disappointing as an answer as well. Not as as well. Like, I don't think your answer is disappointing. But
my answer is disappointing. I will own that. It's just a disappointing non-answer.
I think he's also like, someone tries to steal your baby it's good if they get poisoned to death. Like, you know, I don't think there's like a strong lesson out of Thud like that.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Is it about religious extremism? I think it's certainly that religious extremism exists in the book. I don't think you see extremism really from anybody else apart from the religious sort of group that you see in the book. So I'd agree that it is about that. But I think this is a case of Pratchett sort of saying, this thing is dangerous and I have thoughts about it. I don't necessarily have any answers, so I'm going to write a story where we see how this is bad. And I think that's about it. So I don't think he really intends that there's a specific lesson to draw. And I think that's usually the case in most of his books. Like, this is kind of agreeing with you, Matt. Like, I don't think he goes in and says, I want people to learn this. I think he goes in saying, you know, I'm trying to figure out what I think about this too. And, you know, we mentioned, I think when we were talking about Thud, this is written in the years after 9/11, and it was on everybody's mind in one way or another. You know, how much of this is real? How do we distinguish talking about what is clearly a problem from the political causes of that problem and the broader ideas of religion and everything? And it is, like, particularly if you'd never thought about it much before that time, which a lot of us had not, it is difficult. And I think maybe that writing this book was his way of kind of thinking, well, what is the difference between two people who believe the same thing, but some of them are willing to go to great lengths to protect that belief or enforce that belief, and others are willing to bend with the times and other people. And what is the difference between those people and what are they like? And I don't necessarily know that he comes up with any answers about those things, but I think him writing this was part of him thinking about it and working it out for himself, maybe.
Yeah, in some ways the book kind of replicates what the world was like at that time when it felt like you were meeting an immovable... What's the saying? A movable object with a something?
Yeah, an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object.
And in that you've got this extremism and you've got Vimes, who is, we've discussed, incredibly rigid in his beliefs, clashing. And that was what lots of political, social situations and spaces felt like at that time. And whenever fear pops up, often it feels like those two sides meet up again. But if I'm advocating for that idea that Pratchett is just like, let's allow for complexity, this is a book where you have two sides of an issue who are not allowing for that, who are both saying, no, it's my way or the highway. And that's what that friction is. And and then it's almost like, do you get a satisfying narrative over that, except for hopefully both sides to say, I have to think more, or I have to look a bit harder, or be a bit more generous. I don't know.
Do you think Vimes gets to that point by the end of the book, though? No. This is kind of what you were saying, Liz, is that he has not changed.
No, he has a core view of the world and what a policeman should be, and I think that stays, irrespective of the world around him.
Well, look, I know I'm sort of taking a unusual role here, Liz, by picking the questions, but I'm trying to pick as that sort of segue in, and I want to do another one that's maybe a little bit serious before we get onto some of the fun ones, because there were some good fun ones as well. But Avril was also asking about, how does Pratchett mean us to see Bashful Son? Is he an example of what Pratchett saw as a good, in inverted commas, religious person? And what's with his definition of religion anyway? Where he says it's not a religion. And she talks about how, you know, he explains that Tack wrote the world and the laws and then he left us. He doesn't really care what we think of him, which led to, and I'm just going to throw this in there, and we won't talk about this in too much detail because we just don't have the time, but Zoe had this great thing where she talked about the fact that the way that Bashful Son talks about Dwarven religion is that it's an orthopraxy, not an orthodoxy, which means it's not about what you believe, it's about what you actually do. It's about doing the things, not in whether you believe in a particular reason for doing them. So I thought that was really also interesting, an angle. But what do we think of Bashful Son? How does we didn't talk about him loads in the previous episode.
I don't feel he's not a character that stuck with me after the book. I think he's a character that does a lot of work in the novel, but I don't know, like, you know, it's not really the point of this podcast, but he's not a very fully fleshed out character. I don't know much about him other than how he responds to what Vimes offers him. You know, and I think it's cool that he goes to the games club and plays Thud and knows Kung Fu, but
yeah.
he's a little bit of a cipher or enigma to me.
He absolutely did not stick with me. I definitely was not just looking him up right then. So,
Why? Well, here's my question, though, in response to that. Why do you think Pratchett thought he needed this character? Why didn't he use, say, Cheery or Carrot as someone who knew all the dwarf lore that was necessary, but wasn't one of these very extremist deep downers? Why did he need to invent this sort of nice, friendly Grag character instead?
I think if you're introducing a bunch of like intense, hard to like ones, you can't rely on the ones you've already got to balance that out, because they're sort of part of the wallpaper by then. Like Cheery, as much as we love her, like she's great, but I don't think she would balance it out. That's why you need a new character who shows another side of things. So in terms of the narrative, I think that's possibly why this character was introduced in terms of balance.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I don't know if Pratchett sees him as an example of what a good religious person should be. I mean, I think we see many examples of what a good religious person is in the books, and they're not all the same. I mean, you know, Bashfulson is not the same as Brother. He's not the same as Mightily Oates. I mean, and those are the main examples that spring to mind. He's not the same as Ridcully's brother, whose name currently eludes me.
Handily, it's also Ridcully.
It is, yes, that is handy. But I think, you know, aside from the Science of Discworld books, the Discworld novels, you know, they poke fun at organized religion and the institutions of religion, but they don't poke fun at religious belief so much. And it's not the religious beliefs that are the problem in this book as much as it is the extremism, as you were kind of saying, I think, Liz.
I think he pokes fun at all tradition that is a little bit irrational, irrespective of the source of it.
Yeah. I mean, the Unseen University stuff is another example of that for sure. And we'll see that in an even more extreme way when we get to Unseen Academicals. But we've already seen it in a few of the books as well.
Well, I always think of that, like that key ceremony. I forget which book it's from, but the university one where they're handing over the keys and it's a whole thing and they don't know why they do it. And it's just, yeah.
Yeah. Is that in Hogfather? I think, no, maybe not. It's in one of them though. Yeah. I know the one you mean. Look, we'll get a couple more of these in before we close it. We're not going to get to all your questions.
There's so many good ones, but yeah, only a little bit of time.
There's so many good ones. I do want to just quickly give an answer that I found to one more question of Avril's, which was, do we know if Pratchett read Agatha Christie because Otto Shriek's way of ensuring people are comfortable with him as a vampire reads exactly like a thing that Hercule Poirot says? He's at least familiar with Agatha Christie because he's talked about her in a couple of things. And I found an interview in which he's talking a bit dismissively about Agatha Christie. I'll put a link to that in the episode notes, but he's definitely familiar with her work, whether or not he was a big fan.
I don't know if I want to read that then, because, you know, it's my two people coming up against each other.
Look, it's a pretty brief aside, Liz. I think you'll understand his dismissal and you can poo-poo it as going, but it's so good. And I think that's fine. I think that's
she poo-pooed her own work all the time as well. She's like, even within her book, she'd be like, she has one character noticing that the other author character's books have the same plot with different characters, which is something she has done. But yeah, if you pump out that many books, it's going to happen.
The last serious thing I'll just pop in here is Avril did also say, you know, it's been 17 years since Thud was published. Do we think about things differently if we're reading it in 2022? Stuff like the racist hazing that the coppers do, and we just sort of go, okay, yeah, that's, you know, you hold your own and everything's fine. Or, you know, the way that they talk about affirmative action and stuff like that in the book. Yeah. Is there stuff that you read in this and you went, I don't think about this the same way as I did when I first read it?
Yes, absolutely. I think when I first read it, and we talked about this in the last episode, I found it an unsatisfying narrative and kind of a tone that just didn't make me want to come back. Our discussion actually made me think about it in a much kind of deeper and more interesting way. But that actually makes me think that I'm giving more benefit of the doubt to Pratchett to say, yeah, you wrote a complicated book that isn't a wrapped up, satisfying present to me in the same way that a lot of his books are. And that's the kind of entertainment that I like to have now. I like, you know, compared to 15-year-old me reading this for the first time, I like books and movies and other things that aren't quite as easy to wrap my head around. I guess that's a little bit of a contrast from what the question actually is, where, yes, there are acts that people do in them that I think about differently, but I now maybe think that the book is quite knowing of what those acts are and how they read in the context.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think even things like, not even within this book, things from 5 years ago read weirdly to me now because society has shifted so much. But to draw specifically on Thud, the way that I probably, when I first read this book, would have seen things like how people treated Nobby about his girlfriend, Tawny, I'd have been like, haha, that's very funny, and like that's just what they're doing. But it's actually just kind of horrible how everyone just makes all these assumptions about their dynamic, her job, the way everyone treats her. Like, it's just all, and even like the Sally Angular relationship, I think I would have seen in a very black and white way, whereas now there's just different. You go from, well, I think I've gone from seeing this is the good character and this is the bad character, or this is the one I'm rooting for and this is the one I'm not rooting for, or this is the one who's correct and this is the one who's incorrect. A lot of that has shifted into shades of grey or even swapped around. So, and I think that's, again, the beauty of a complex book, that it's not just laid out in a clear way that doesn't change.
Yeah. I mean, I think I have a pretty similar experience to Avril in my first thoughts, if I can borrow a Pratchett phrase. When I reread the books now, a lot of the time I go, ooh, you wouldn't write that quite that way now necessarily. But then, you know, as you get deeper into the story and a little more nuance comes out, often, but not always, there's a second thought, which is like, oh, but, and there's a big difference too between reading something that is clearly an expression of a thought the author has and reading something which is a thought that the author is interrogating. And so I think most of the time when there's stuff in the book that I'm like, it's usually becomes something that gets interrogated or kicked around and goes, is this like a good way to think or is this a good way to behave? And sometimes there's stuff in there that is just, here it is, because in 2005 or 1984 or whatever year it was when he was writing, nobody thought twice about those sorts of things. So, yeah.
I definitely think something like the phrasing of how Tawny is talked about is really interesting, because I think I'm really fine with the characters to treat her badly because people treat people badly. And these do not have to be perfect characters for me to continue to follow them from book to book. But obviously there are moments, and I think hearing the two of you talk about how Pratchett describes a character like Agnes Nitt, where it is just not necessary to continue to bring up, especially like a female character's intelligence or physical appearance in the ways that he falls back on comedic crutches, and comedic I'm putting in inverted commas. It's a really funny thing to go back and read those. We were like, you've set up terrible characters to have these perspectives on these characters, and yet you yourself are perpetuating the same thing in your narrative voice. And I guess that always pops up, and this book falls prey to that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so whether it's coming from the characters or whether it's coming from Pratchett, it matters.
Yeah, that's a big difference too. Yeah. Whose voice it's in. Look, let's finish off with some of the fun questions that we got sent, because there were quite a lot and we only got to touch on a few. A Chew and Sneezed on Twitter just had a massive thread, which was so good. Like, it's worth reading on your own, and we will link to it in the episode notes. But there were a few other ones that he came up with that I think we would like to do. I know definitely the first one that comes to mind for me is there's a great scene in this where they're in the cocktail bar and they're ordering all these ridiculous cocktails. And it should say wanted us to say, what kind of Discworld cocktails could we make up? While you're thinking, I'll read out the ones that he suggested. He came up with Veterinari's Nuts, which would be Frangelico and Amaretto based.
If you ordered a Veterinari's Nuts, you should expect to wake up upside down in that pit of spikes.
In the scorpion pit.
Bold of you to assume they get to wake up.
Well, I mean, would he know? I mean, he would know, but would he really do something about it? I feel like maybe he'd...
I feel like he wouldn't tolerate Veterinari's Nuts because that chips away at his image as a serious guy. So he'd deal with it, but in a way that he nips that in the bud.
Well, if you were going to make this nut-based cocktail, who would you name it after on the Discworld then?
It has to be Veterinari's Nuts, but I'm just saying that the person, like, you'd only get to drink it for a very limited time.
Okay, sure. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's a particularly unhappy hour.
Yeah.
K-double and your life.
I'll grant that. I think the other ones that the Dame Chew and Sneeze came up with were the Night Watch Ruin, which is a beer and a shot of beer huggers and Clatchy and coffee, which presumably cancel each other out. So you drink it and you feel exactly the same afterwards. That's my commentary. I don't know if that was the intention there. and the Witch's Tit, which I think is actually a name of a cocktail in some places, I'm sure. But anyway, he says it's got apples in it. Well, mainly apples. I feel like that is a name of a cocktail that would exist on the Discworld.
Sure, yeah. That's a scumble variety of drink, obviously.
Yeah, for sure.
I've got a few that I came up with.
Yeah.
Okay, so number one, a rinse gin. That is a gin and tonic style cocktail or just mixed drink served in a hollowed out potato.
Wonderful.
And because, this is the person who is constantly surviving by escaping their enemies, it has to come with a chaser.
But like a really intense one, like a really strong alcohol.
Yeah. Mm.
Yep. All right.
We've got the banana dakarook or the banana daka ook.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
Only one bartender knows how to make it, and the ingredient list will never be explained outside of that relationship.
Yes. A favorite of the creator of the Discworld as well.
And if that bartender was busy, the one client who ordered it would just not even have to lean over the bar, but would be able to reach over and make the cocktail themselves.
Which bar do you think he goes to? Beers?
No, he's a Mended Drum regular as an unofficial watchman, yeah?
That's true. Although there is a watch pub which is not the Mended Drum, but he does show up in the Mended Drum several times. So I think you're right. He'd be a regular at the Mended Drum, and no one would bother him.
So I've got a couple more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Troll Punch.
Yep. Okay.
Which is you just never wake up from.
Yep. Yep.
Has it got slab sprinkled around the edge of the glass? How they do salt?
I think they just crunch up the edge of the glass and you drink that.
Oof.
It's a one smashed glass turned into another glass. Perfect.
Yeah.
And the last one is if music with rocks in it ever comes back to the disc, I think all the bands would be encouraged to do a red shoey at the end of, in the middle of their show.
We need to explain a shoey because not all of our audience is Australian.
So a shoey has bizarrely popped up as a kind of constant call out at Australian concerts and gigs where young people in the crowd will encourage the lead singer or the performer to scull a beer out of a shoe, usually a shoe from an audience member. It speaks to everything that makes me roll my eyes at Australianisms.
Yeah. Yep.
I guess my take on a red shoey, though, is depending on how hardcore the band is whether or not you fish out the spare toes that are at the bottom of the shoe before you drink it.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, I don't think I could top any of those. Those are amazing, Matt. That's incredible.
I want to make all of these except for the last one because that sounds like my nightmares. I only had one, and it is the Sybil Disobedience. And it's one that you only find it in the Vimes household, and it was created by accident. And what it is a very expensive whiskey, sort of over 25 years old, very peaty. Because Sybil seems like she'd just be into a whiskey, a snifter at the end of the night, perhaps. And Vimes was making her a drink, and he accidentally poured some creme de cacao into it. That chocolatey one.
Yeah.
And somehow together it works. It doesn't quite make sense. But, there you go. And it's about both of them. So it's a Sybil Disobedience.
I love it. I love it.
I love it.
I want to drink most of those, but I won't. I might not survive. That was very
I can't stop thinking about, chewing toes through a beer. It's
Now, another one of Dane's questions, and we're not going to try and do all of yours, Dane, because you had so many. But the other one that I really liked was he said, when I think about tertiary characters, A. Passmore rarely registers, but he is actually quite a delight in this book. Do you have any characters who appear just once who you love? In the Discworld books, I'm assuming he means.
Or just in the background, because he lists Otto as a character, as one of these, and Cassanunda. So just not mains, but
yeah, and particularly one-offs. But yeah, we can extend it to those sort of background characters as well. I mean, we talked about Otto being one of our faves last time, and Cassanunda. But are there any ones who just appear the one time though? And you never see them again, but they were great that one time.
I'm a big fan of maybe the flip side of the coin of Pesimal, which is Inigo Skimmer.
Oh, yeah.
The clerk who is assigned to hang out with Vimes and then turns out to kind of be a dark clerk with a few extra skills besides bookkeeping and diplomacy.
Yep.
And I also love heaps of the villains. Like, I think Pratchett just writes phenomenal, excellent, creepy, weird, over-the-top, psychologically astute and exaggerated villains. And, you know, they rarely have to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, more Pin and Tulip. I'd like that. But mine's not a fun one. It's more like this is a character that I think about more than I feel like he was written about as the one that shows up at the seamstresses wanting all his socks mended. Yeah.
The old guy.
He's gotten a misunderstanding about what seamstress means, and he literally wants someone to darn his socks because his wife has died, and that's just so charming and sad and bittersweet, and you only see him for a moment, and he's there to just basically drive a pun about why they call themselves seamstresses. But I just think that's just a beautiful character. He's real, like, baby shoes for sale, never worn kind of character.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this, and I think for me it's often a group of characters. So I do like the sort of the central trio of Tepic and Chitta and Tracy in Pyramids, and we never see or hear from them again. And I would have totally gone for more of them, even in the background.
Oh, the camel.
And the camel, yeah. The
greatest mathematician in the world.
Yeah, would have been great. But I think the other one for me, the ones that are sort of very like secondary background characters, but who I really enjoyed, and I always kind of hoped that they'd show up again, and I don't think they ever do, are the Clax crew. Princess and Grandad and the others, like, who are like, you know, they work on the Clax towers and they know how it works. And then also the smoking GNU as well. Like that bunch of like real nerds who know how it works.
And pigeon fanciers.
Yeah. And they have the mobile Clax tower stuff. I was like, they were great. I'd love to see them show up again. Like, surely there could have been some, you know, in inverted commas, computer crime in a later book, but I don't think they ever return, but I really enjoyed them. I think they'd be my faves, but there's so many. There's always a couple in any given book. Even in Thud, like, what's her name? The woman in the gem shop. I thought she was great.
I think about the God of Hangovers sometimes. From Hogfather.
Yeah.
Or does he think about you?
Well, we're both bearing as much of each other. So,
well, look, one last one, and look, this was incredibly difficult, even though we answered some of these last time to narrow this down. But we're going to finish off with this one with a bit of fun. Damien Smith on Twitter, who also said, I got a big Coombe Valley as the friends we made along the way vibe from this book. But we won't answer that question because that one's too hard. But we will answer your other question, Damien, which was, in the light of Brick and Mr. Shine, how else could you see trolls appearing? There's a big wide world of polymers out there and other materials. What do we reckon? Like, and particularly as the disc world continues to evolve after the events of Thud, what kind of, you know, unusual or new trolls would we see appearing?
I'd like to see a Trolls Golem crossover thing because they're similar but very different. So, like, how did they work as two different groups with very different backgrounds but physiologically quite a lot in common? It's not quite the question, but that's just something that I wish I could have seen more of.
Well, do you think then you'd see a porcelain troll who'd get mistaken for a golem?
Ooh. Yeah, like, where's the border between troll and golem? Trollem. Sorry.
I've always been interested in the, this makes me sound like a perv, but the dating life of trolls. I really like Devlish and Ruby.
Yes.
And I know you haven't spoken about Monstrous Regiment yet, but I really loved, there's a troll called Jade in that book, and they have a quick interaction with another troll, which speaks to kind of troll mating rituals. And I just, you know, I think the idea of a Discworld troll epic romance or a rom-com, a troll rom-com would be great.
I would, again, read the hell out of that book.
Well, now I'm imagining like the troll version of like Romeo and Juliet, but what things would the trolls be made of that would make them be two clans who their elders forbid them to be together?
It was like a chalk and something else.
Would they be like ebony and ivory, or that's not really stones, though, is it?
Coprolites and magnesioids or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can it literally repel? Yeah.
Oh, like the opposite magnetic poles. That's great. hadn't thought of that. I did wonder whether you could have a story about aliens, like if you had, because you know how Tethys, the water troll, he's not from the Discworld, he's from another planet. And he ended up on the Discworld. It's not gone into in a lot of detail, but could you have a troll who was made of like meteorite iron, and would there be some weird thing with like elves and stuff because of that? I thought that could be interesting. And I haven't read Raising Steam, so I don't know if this is a thing, but when you start to get steam trains on the Discworld, could you have an iron troll? And how would they interact with the trains?
Coal troll.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's certainly trolls named Coal.
And then, or is that a golem? There we go.
All right. So you've got all these steam trains, and then you've got the fat coal troller. And
maybe a troll, like, gets made into the front of the train so it's got a face. Oh, no.
And then they have to brick him up behind a whole bunch of little trolls.
I really hope, listener, that you know about Thomas the Tank Engine, or that last little bit is going to seem really weird.
I mean, it's still really weird, even if you do know about the Thomas the Tank Engine.
Okay, that's fair.
You should get real Edgar Allan Poe on them.
No one was sitting at home saying, what a sensible way to end the podcast. Absolutely what I expected. That visual image.
I think, but you are on the money there, Matt. I think this is absolutely how we have to end it. Matt, thank you so much for coming back again.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
We'll be back next month, of course, in February, when we're 64 months old, that is, on the podcast. When we'll be
Are you making a Beatles reference, Ben?
I am eating Beatles. Yes. Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
That's good, in fact.
Okay, well, look, I think it's fair to say the end of this episode's got away from us a bit. But before we go, a couple of important announcements. First of all, next month, we'll be reading another short story. We're going back to Pratchett's early days for the first time in quite a while, and we're going to be reading Rinsmangle, the Gnome of Even More. This is one of the stories he wrote when writing for children for a newspaper, and this story is quite influential on his later work. So I'm really looking forward to reading it and discussing it. That's next month. You can find it in 2 collections. It's in A Blink of the Screen. It's also in The Witch's Vacuum Cleaner. That'll be for Pratchett 64. Another announcement, we are once again doing a reading challenge this year. Now, we did this last year. Basically, this is to help you if you want to read some books along with the podcast and then also read some stuff that is like Pratchett but maybe different. We've come up with 6 prompts where you can find something that has something in common with Pratchett's work but try a new author. And as well as those 6 prompts, we've also suggested this year that you branch out a little bit and look for some authors who maybe are underrepresented in publishing, particularly in the Anglosphere. We've got details about that on our website, pratchettpodcast.com. Just go to the main menu and under more, you'll find a selection that says Reading Challenge. The prompts for last year are also still there, and you can also find that challenge on The Story Graph, which is a great website where you can track your reading. Not an ad, we just really like The Story Graph. If you really like us, Pratchett, while you're at pratchettpodcast.com, why not check out our Support Us page, where you can find out how you can support this show and help us keep making it without needing to put any pesky ads in it. You can find out all the details about memberships in the Ook Club and what little extra goodies you can get by doing that. But really the most important thing is that you will be keeping this podcast going. We are in our 6th year, hard to believe, and we hope to keep going until we've done every book and all of the significant short stories we think are worth covering on their own, or which are just a lot of fun, like this one.
Can I say one behind the scenes tidbit which people don't know and which really excited me the 2 times I've been on? Is that I don't think people understand that Ben and Liz perform the theme music live for every podcast.
We swore you to secrecy.
That's too good. I just got to let the people know.
All right. Well,
I do have a beautiful singing voice, and it's important that the public finally get to know about it.
Yeah. And I mean, look, it's we had to pick the instruments very specifically so we could talk whilst playing them for the outro, much as I'm doing right now.
The way you can talk around a nose fife, Ben, it's incredible.
Don't give away all our secrets, Matt, please. Thank you once again for coming back. And of course, thank you, listener, for listening. And until next time, meeting adjourned. Biscuits? You've been listening to Pratchett, the monthly Terry Pratchett Book Club podcast with Pratchetters Elizabeth Flux, Ben McKenzie, that's me, and guest Matt Roden. Pratchett is produced and edited by me, with music by David Ashton of Sample & Hold Studios. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Pratchett Podcast, and listen to past episodes and support the production of new ones via pratchettpodcast.com. Join the conversation for this episode using the hashtag Pratchett63.
Pratchett is brought to you by Splendid Chaps Productions. We make entertainment for your ears, like the Doctor Who podcast Splendid Chaps and time travel comedy series Night Terrace. To find out more, visit splendidchaps.com.